Well, welcome to the 700 Club. FBI Director Christopher Wray will step down before President-elect Donald Trump takes office in January. Trump put the pressure on Wray to leave by naming his choice to replace him.
His nominee, Kash Patel, has promised to radically clean house and restore trust in the agency. George Thomas has more.
Wray is 7 years into what was supposed to be a 10-year assignment as director of the agency. He made the announcement during a FBI town hall.
This is not easy for me. I love this place. I love our mission, and I love our people. But my focus is, and always has been, on us and on doing what's right for the FBI.
Wray, appointed by Trump in 2017, faced considerable criticism from the former president, particularly following the FBI's raid on Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence in 2022 during an investigation into classified documents. The resignation of Christopher Wray is a great day for America, Trump wrote on Truth Social. Wray's tenure also involved high-profile investigations that led to 2 indictments against Trump. Virginia Democratic Senator Mark Warner says Wray's abrupt departure sets a concerning precedent.
There's a reason we put in place the idea that an FBI director would serve for 10 years so that you weren't subject to the whims of a particular president. Am I worried about that independence of the FBI? You bet.
With Wray stepping down, attention has now turned to Kash Patel, Trump's nominee to replace him. The 44-year-old Patel made the rounds on Capitol Hill Monday to secure support ahead of tough confirmation hearings. Patel has been a fierce critic of the FBI, suggesting that he would shrink its power, close its D.C. headquarters, and radically overhaul the department. Before his nomination, Patel was asked by Fox News how he would restore trust in the FBI and DOJ.
One thing: exposure of corruption. Put out the documents, put out the evidence. We only have gotten halfway down the Russiagate hole. The people need to know that their FBI is restored by knowing full well what they did to unlawfully surveil them.
Trump and many conservatives believe the FBI and Department of Justice are weaponized against Republicans and those who hold conservative values. Patel has promised to tackle what he perceives as a deep state against Trump.
Patel is somebody who has a very different vision for the Bureau than Wray. He's talked openly about his desire to rid the government of, quote, conspirators against Donald Trump. He said that could include going after the media or people in government who are perceived as having been disloyal.
Kash met with Senator John Cornyn of Texas, who said he'd be inclined to back his nomination.
I want to make sure that we restore the reputation of these agencies, these departments like the FBI and the Department of Justice and the intelligence community, that we restore their reputation as non-political institutions.
George Thomas, CBN News.
And that's going to be a very hard job, regardless of who takes over the FBI, to restore it as a non-political institution. In the history of the FBI, going back to even to Hoover, and I guess I should say especially under Hoover, it was definitely a political organization, and it exercised political levers over sitting politicians. They had briefs on all of them, and they would use that. In the current environment, what about the Russia dossier that was created by the Clinton campaign? Why wasn't that identified by the FBI initially as this isn't real? And it just boggles your mind that they would unleash a full investigation of a presidential campaign and then of an incoming administration based on the allegations of that, including trying to entrap General Flynn in some kind of obstruction of justice claim or lying to federal agents. They absolutely set him up, and it's in their own notes. So to restore the integrity of that, you have to have a full airing of what happened and why did it happen. Was that in turn based on ideology, that people within the FBI feared what Trump would do and were trying to derail his presidency before it ever started. If that's the case, well, let's investigate that and let's look at that and hold people accountable for it. It seems from the outside that, yes, indeed. It also seems from some of the text messages exchanged that, yes, indeed, there was an ideology that said we can't have Trump take power. If he does take power, we're going to hamstring him along the way. Now you look at some of the other things the FBI is doing, including full SWAT teams going after abortion protesters. And is that not overkill? How about plain clothes going to raid a former president's home? That doesn't make any sense to me. They have assault weapons. They're in gear that you can't identify who they are. And in a democracy, where does that belong? Why do you need that kind of firepower to look into a closet in Mar-a-Lago? Again, it doesn't make any sense. It's clearly trying to send a message. They were clearly trying to have it be on news media with all of the lights and everything else and all of the weapons in full display, as if somehow, you know, we're enforcing the rule of law. Well, they didn't enforce it against Biden, who kept classified documents in his garage. And so, you know, it seems to, again, someone on the outside, you're being political with this. So how do you change that? And can any one person come into that environment and change it? I'm not sure, but it absolutely needs to happen. At what point in a democracy, when the people who are governed say, I don't trust our government, I don't trust the political process, I can vote for people, people come into office, but the underlying bureaucracy never changes. It seems to be against me based on what I think or what I say or who I work with or who I vote for. If that's the case, then we have lost our wonderful republic and we need to get it back. In other news, President Joe Biden is setting a new record for granting clemency. John Jessup has that story and more from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
Thanks, Gordon. The president is commuting the sentences of about 1,500 people and issuing pardons for 39 others. The pardons given to those convicted of nonviolent crimes such as drug use who've since demonstrated changed lives, including a woman who led emergency response teams during natural disasters and a church deacon who counseled addicts. Many commutations apply to those who were released from prison and served home confinement during the pandemic. The actions come about 2 weeks after the president pardoned his son Hunter for federal gun and tax convictions. Well, turning now to the Middle East, where Israel has won major concessions from Hamas in ceasefire negotiations. According to the Wall Street Journal, for the first time, the terror group says it will agree to a deal allowing Israeli troops to temporarily remain in Gaza. It's also turned over a list of hostages, including Americans, it will release in the deal. In Washington, the U.S. House of Representatives approved hundreds of millions of dollars in military aid to Israel. The House passed on Wednesday the annual defense spending bill. It reportedly includes $500 million for U.S.-Israel missile defense programs like the Iron Dome. Well, just days after the fall of the Bashar al-Assad regime in Syria, the region is adjusting to the new realities on the ground. Well, one area on the border with Turkey could be ground zero for a battle between Western values and Islamic ambitions. CBN's Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem.
While the leader of the main faction of Syria's rebel forces is pledging no new war, a democratic enclave in northeast Syria that's home to Kurds, Yazidis, and Christians is being attacked by a proxy army of Turkey. CBN News spoke with a Christian from northeast Syria by phone. To protect his identity, we have disguised his voice and can't show his face. We're calling him Gabriel.
So, yeah, we are under attack, and we don't think that Erdogan and his proxies are going to stop in this place in the north.
The autonomous administration in northeast Syria is unique in all of the Middle East. CBN News reported on this new government back in this 2019 report.
It's completely new in the Middle East, and I'd say it's completely new in the whole world.
Freelance journalist Carlos Zurituza has covered this new government for several years.
What these people are actually doing is rebuilding themselves, starting from scratch after decades of repression by the Assad regime. So literally from day one, since 2012, since they liberated their territories, they are in the process of reconstructing civil society, integrating the different components in the region, not just Kurds, it's Arabs, Armenians, Syriacs.
During the war to defeat ISIS, the autonomous administration partnered with the U.S. and allied forces.
They are more similar in human rights to what we believe in the West, and critically, they have freedom of religion and belief and an overrepresentation of religious minorities. So what's happened is they stand in direct opposition to these jihadi Islamist groups, HTS and SNA. And so today we are seeing the SNA is being used as the militia to break down and attack northeast Syria.
The autonomous administration fears the Turkish government of President Erdogan, who has stated his intention to defeat the Kurds of northeast Syria. Given the attacks by Turkish-backed forces and Erdogan's threats, the people of northeast Syria are calling out to the U.S., the West, and the Christian world for help.
We call on all the Christians in the world to call their nations and brothers and sisters in their administration to make the Christian, the Kurds and Druze and all the minorities to be able to protect themselves from these kind of atrocities.
Gabriel says northeast Syria is not asking for foreign troops, but for the resources to defend themselves.
Especially the Trump administration and the Israeli government to make this happen, because Christians all over Syria, Christians all over Lebanon, all over Iraq, they want to survive.
Heading believes it's important to pray for this fledgling Middle East democracy.
Because in this area, you have people who can believe whatever they want. Christians, Yazidis, even Muslim background believers who have come to faith in Jesus are able to practice their religion in this area. So pray for northeast Syria, that it'll remain stable and that the international community would stand and back northeast Syria against these Islamist jihadis.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Thanks, Chris. Gordon, still a lot of questions after this historic regime change.
There are still a lot of questions, and I think we ought to pay attention to what the Christian community in Syria is telling us, and they're telling us quite clearly they don't feel safe, and they are leaving. And just imagine being through the horrors of this civil war, going through all of that, and then in the aftermath saying, well, I'm not safe anymore. Well, that tells you there's a whole nother level coming. We've seen what ISIS did to Christian communities in Iraq, and you know, is that going to happen in Syria? Well, the Christians are thinking, yes, indeed, it will. And then you look at what's happening in the Kurdish region in the north of Syria, literally being annexed by Turkey, Turkey supplying all the military force there, all the money for it. And yes, it is time for us to all be alarmed. I know Turkey wants to reestablish the Ottoman Empire. They've declared that. That ought to get everyone's attention. Turkey is a NATO country, and if they get expansionist and say, well, we're now going to annex Syria because of all of the unrest and uncertainty, we need to bring order to that, and by the way, we're going to take it. Well, now they have a direct route into Israel, and Erdogan has said, yes, I want Israel too. But so has the current group. ISIS was quite clear. First, we're going to be Damascus, and next, we're going to be Jerusalem. And pay attention to it, and pay attention to the symbolism. They made this announcement of the takeover in a mosque. They didn't make it at the presidential palace, and they didn't make it at the seat of government. They made it at the seat of the religion, and they did it at a mosque. That is important, and let's pay attention to it. The Christians on the ground in Syria certainly are, and they ought to tell us what we need to do now.